Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Joanna. Let's get started. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bouncing Back. I am your host, Joanna, and today we are going to be talking about decoding financial well-being. Now, I know that sounds a bit vague at the moment, but we'll jump right into all of that. But before that, I'd love to introduce our guest for today, and that's Roslyn Russell. Ros is a professor and principal research fellow in the School of Economics, Finance and Marketing at RMIT University. Ros has been researching financial capabilities and financial well-being in Australia for more than 20 years now. Hi, Ros. How are you today?
Hello, Joanna. I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being here with us.
It's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to it.
Amazing. Now, before we jump into everything, I'd love if you could tell us a bit more about who you are and what it is you do.
Well, I am a research-only academic, which means I don't lecture undergraduates, but I've supervised many PhD students throughout my career, and basically my research, I do a lot of applied research, so doing work that's useful for government, community sector, and the finance industry with the topic of financial well-being.
Great. And what sparked your interest in finance, and what made you want to get into this sort of world?
Well, it was quite accidental, actually, and it was about 20 years ago. I was starting my research career with RMIT University after doing a PhD in chaos theory, actually, and systems, and that was sort of my theoretical background. And when I started my work at RMIT, my role was to bring in money to the university and to do applied work and build partnerships with industry and organisations within the community. So this area came along. I was asked by ANZ and the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence to actually work with them on evaluating a very innovative program that was aimed at helping people who are on low incomes and sort of build their financial capabilities, their financial literacy, and develop a savings habit. So that was all very new to me. So it was basically learning by doing, and I sort of started in that area, and that area really took off, and it became so fascinating to me that I saw this work change people's lives, and mostly women were involved. So to me, that was really important that I could see women, single mums, really become part of this program, and also it changed their lives and started their financial well-being future. So it was really interesting to me, and it became more and more interesting, and the area just grew and grew, and until I sort of became very central to this work, especially in Australia.
Yeah, and that sounds so great, and I hope we'll get to dive into some of those insights as well today. But before we do that, we have a section called Have You Met Ros? So here we're just going to ask you some little get to know you questions. So my first one for you is, what is your favourite book?
Wow, that's a hard question. Look, thinking about that, there's been so many for different reasons and in very different areas, and it might sound a bit strange, but one of my favourite books, which is, I guess, quite recent, I read it last year or listened to it actually as an audio book, was called The Storyteller, And it's by Dave Grohl, who's the lead singer of the Foo Fighters.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And it really sort of gripped me, I suppose. It was funny, it was heartfelt, and it was sad. Like, I would listen to it on the train, and one minute I'd be laughing, next minute I'd be crying. It was such a beautiful book, and it made me sort of admire him a lot. And I wasn't even a really big Foo Fighters fan. I sort of am now, actually. Yeah. But it was a beautiful book. It was so enjoyable. But apart from that, I mean, I think of books that sort of really had an influence on me and changed me. And years and years ago, I read by a very little-known politician, Barack Obama, at the time. It was in the 90s. I read his first book that was Hopes from My Father. And, I mean, no one had even heard of him here in Australia. Every now and again, there were little snippets in the newspaper of this up-and-coming senator. But that was the first book. And, again, the writing was so beautiful. And his ability to tell a story and also learning about his life. It was really, it changed me and it stayed with me. And then, of course, the Audacity of Hope was his next book. And then, of course, he became, the president. So I have never stayed up to watch the inauguration of an American president. Never since, actually, as well.
Yeah, fair enough.
I know. But I did for him. I just couldn't, because I think I'd read that book so early on that, and then I just sort of, as the time went on, he progressed, and it was just like, wow. And to me, he's always, and I went to see him last year when he came to Australia, which was like the highlight of my life. Those books were really important to me. And in my studies, there was a book called The Order Out of Chaos, which was sort of seminal to my PhD, and so that opened up my eyes and opened up my mind to these areas of quantum physics. And I'm not a scientist; I don't come from a science background, so learning about new things. And the way that, the chaos theory sort of theory, it just sort of thought this makes sense,
Yeah.
So it sort of changed me, and it also had a big impact on my my work and it was core to my PhD. So it was really meaningful to me.
Yeah. And I love when like you mentioned, you started reading Barack Obama's books long before he became president, and then you get to be part of that journey, and you feel
I know.
really invested when great things start happening for them, or when he became president, you would have been like, I read his books way before this happened. I've known him for so long.
I know.
Yeah.
It is exactly. And like others, or sometimes you do get disappointed later on, but I never have. I know things, as a president, he wasn't able to achieve everything that he wanted to because of the way things were structured and the way the parties were, and majorities and minorities and that type of thing. But to me, he's the most had so much integrity, and the way that he acted himself was always, it was a great way to, a great role model, if you want to say that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually a perfect segue into one of my questions, which is, do you have a role model?
Well, look, he's a great role model. I think, the term role model these days, I mean, when I was young, I've certainly had mentors, mentors that really, as you go through your PhD and your academic life, you do have mentors that you look to. And I think now they're more like, there's different ones for different areas. And I think they're people that I admire rather than having them as role models, I suppose. So I have academic heroes that, there's a professor in the States who was core to this work that I've been doing, Michael Sherrard, and then then there would be politicians like Jacinda Ardern, who is a great female role model. Penny Wong is a great role model, and so you have different ones for different in different sort of sectors of your brain or different parts of your brain.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that. Like if you think about a certain topic in life, you think about a certain person and you're like, wow, they really embody that. And then if I think about something else, I'm like, there's this other person that reminds me of this.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, I've got a couple more questions here. And my next one is, what is a movie that you've recently enjoyed?
Oh, I love the movies. I really do. I think the one that has still stayed with me after a few weeks, I suppose. It's a recent one, American Fiction, which is
Oh.
it's one that came. It's about an author who's a Black American, and he was struggling, and then he just thought, oh, I'm going to write a satire. It's almost like a joke about people just wanted to read stereotypical black literature, and it was like, so it's like almost like a joke that he did, and it really took off, and he put it under another name, and it was almost, but what it was really saying was like, people, when it was having a dig at the white elite, actually, who just thought, and they just stereotyped this Black American as that, because they wanted the book to be, to show the stereotypical experience of a Black American. And to me, it had a bit of funniness in it, and it had a bit of, it also had other family stuff entwined in it as well. But in the work that we do, we try to be, apply the intersectionality lens to a lot of the stuff that we do, and stereotyping people and different cultures is really, something that we have tried to fight against, and I think it's a really important part of our any research or any work that goes on is not to pigeonhole people and not to stereotype people, and so it was quite a bit of a dig at that, and it was satire, and it was funny, and it was good. I really liked it because it had these other and a few different sort of threads going through it. He was also caring for his mother who had Alzheimer's, so it showed that part of people's lives when they have to care for family members, and again, that has come into a lot of my research as well, and about resilience too, about when we're faced with these life events and how that can really throw your plans off track, So look, it was good. It's worth watching. It's on one of the streaming platforms at the moment, and
Okay.
yeah, American Fiction. It's good.
Oh, lovely. I haven't heard of that one, but that sounds really all-encompassing, and it sounds like it covers a lot
It's
of
good,
different
yeah.
aspects of life.
And it had laughs in it too, which I'm really quite prone to comedies as well. I like funny movies.
Oh, yeah, no, me too. But thank you so much for sharing that one. And I've got one last question here, which is, are you listening to any podcasts at the moment?
I do. I'm a big podcast listening. Again, many different kinds, from Bang On, which is Zan Rowe, and Before Hearst, which is about popular culture and what's going on. And they'll always have a little bit of they'll have a rundown of the movies that they've been watching and books that they've read. And so that's a really great. It's also funny, but it's also gives you an overview of what's going on in popular culture, the movies, and a bit about celebrities and stars. So there's that kind. And there's also the Minefield. I listen to a lot that are on the ABC. So the Minefield, which talks about today's ethical dilemmas, and Scott Stevens and Waleed Ali, they talk, and they have a guest speaker, which is normally an academic that comes in, and they talk to them about different issues. And that's really interesting. Our book club, book show, books and authors. There's 3 different ones that go, the UK ones. I like listening to a lot of the UK BBC podcasts as well. So yeah, look, I have a number that depends on my mood, and sometimes if I can't sleep at night, I'll put one on, and it's really great.
Oh, beautiful. There's so many there that you've listed off, which is amazing. So I think you're the perfect person to be on the show as well, because I feel like you've just got so much knowledge that you can draw from. So with that, I'd love to jump into our interview for today. So my first question, just to start everything off, is simple, but what is financial well-being?
Financial well-being is, and it comes from, it's part of our well-being. So it's one component of our well-being. And I think that's the first important thing to realize, that it's not one thing in itself. It is interconnected with other areas of our life. And so financial well-being essentially is, and the definition and that the research has shown, but also when I talk to regular people, I'll say, what does financial well-being mean to you? And they will reflect the definition, but essentially it's being able to cover your day-to-day expenses and your obligations, being able to have financial resilience and the ability to cope with unexpected events, be able to have security for the future, and also to have some money left over in order to allow you to make choices that you can enjoy life. So choices that are independent, that are specific to you. So what do you like to spend your money? It might be movies, books, or a holiday. So it's those four elements that really comprise financial well-being. And of course, at any time in our life, there's going to be ones that are more dominant than others, and they're not all the same. So they can sort of, they're moving parts, I suppose. So essentially that's all. That's what it is. That's all it is. That's not all it is, but that's what it is. So it's quite simple. It sounds simple, but there's a lot of complexity that sits behind the concept of financial well-being.
Yeah, and I know we're talking about resilience today. So how does financial well-being contribute to an individual's overall resilience in the face of adversity or hardship?
It's very closely connected. What we would see it as, though, is the opposite, that financial resilience is part of financial well-being. I know it sounds, and it's probably bi-directional there as well, but we see that as one component of we see financial well-being as the umbrella, I suppose, and sitting under that is financial resilience, day-to-day expenses, financial security, and for the future, and being comfortable. So financial resilience is a big part and a very important part of financial well-being, and it's, I think financial resilience is something that people are often a little bit short of, especially at the moment. And I think that's one of the main areas where we struggle with, and the industry struggles with, and the government trying to build people's resilience, because we find that people are generally, they'll make do to make sure they meet their expenses, and they'll get their rent paid, they'll pay their food, and that's about it. And unfortunately, that resilience part often gets there's not enough money left over to build that financial resilience, unfortunately. So we do find that that's the area that we really need to focus on with people. So hence that, it was great to be able to come and talk to you about this.
Yeah, definitely. And I find that it's a really interesting topic these days, especially with young people. I feel like financial well-being isn't something that people consider as much. So I'd love to talk about why developing awareness about financial well-being and why it should be something we talk about, something we consider, especially when we're younger. Why should we start considering our financial well-being? Why shouldn't we just wait until we're older and it actually starts becoming important?
That's a good question. Look, financial well-being is, because it is part of a wider system, it is part of that well-being. It interacts with all of our other parts. So if you want to have a healthy life, we need some sort of financial well-being in order to make that happen, in order to to optimize that. If we want to have security and a place to live, that depends on our financial well-being.
Yeah.
It's like everything that we want, it's connected to, and it impacts on other parts of our life, and other parts of our life impact on our financial well-being as well. So health, for instance, and I think in the last 20 years, what I've seen the biggest impacts are mental health, physical health, and financial health are the three sort of main pillars. And what I've seen in the research is that if any one of those are damaged, the other two are going to be impacted. And it doesn't matter which one comes first. If you get sick and you're unable to work, well, what's going to happen to your financial well-being? And same with if you're financially stressed and you start and it affects you mentally, then it starts to affect you physically. And it's so they're so intertwined, it's very difficult to separate it out from the other parts of our life. So I think that, we all need to realize that it is integral to our life as much as the other things that we think more about, I suppose. So we might be thinking about holidays, and we might be thinking about, going to a concerts, or we might be thinking about, just trying to make ends meet. So that's all part of your financial well-being. So I think that, people and young people think about it, they may not be thinking about it in that term, although it's becoming far more popularized now, the financial well-being terminology.
Yeah, definitely. And there's like books like The Barefoot Investor, and so many like trends in finance that are emerging, especially through social media, which I feel like is making the topic of finance a bit more palatable and a bit more digestible. I'd love to talk to you about like certain phrases that I've noticed people use, like we always make money, money always comes back to us, it always works out, things always work out. And I feel like a lot of people have that sort of laissez-faire mentality when it comes to money. Do you think that that is productive, optimistic, or do you think that people need to take things a bit more seriously?
Look, you brought up a very good point. And as our research and knowledge has increased in this area, we've come to realize that our mindsets are the driving force and one of the most important factors in influencing our financial well-being. And actually, at RMIT, I developed with designers and developers and educators a micro-credential aimed at students, and it was called Know Your Money Mindset. And so there are these different categories of people that have different ways of thinking about money, and I think that it all comes from, we call it our financial socialization. So from our backgrounds, from our home life, from how we saw money role modeled in the home, but that attitude that you were just talking about there, it could be quite a dangerous one, and it's one that we find where that's usually. It stops people from having financial resilience because they do think, oh, well, it'll all just work out and things just all work out. And that is linked back to a sort of a locus of control. And financial well-being has a strong psychology aspect to it, and which also makes it very interesting for me to study as well. And so it's like locus of control, where you either think you are in the driver's seat of your life if you have a internal locus of control, but there are people with external locus of control where they just sort of think, oh, whatever I do, it doesn't matter, it'll just happen, and they're not doing anything or taking responsibility or taking ownership of their pathway. And so that's it doesn't lend itself nicely to financial resilience, because I think resilience, as you would know, has a foundation of internal action and internal mindset. But these different ways of thinking are very, very core to financial well-being and predicting how your financial well-being will be. In one case, we do work in a system and live in a system where we aren't individuals. I mean, we are individual, but we're within a system that impacts us. So,
Yeah.
and that's one thing that I really want to make clear, that sometimes as an individual, it's not all up to us. So we need enabling factors from the system in order to make sure our resilience can grow. But we sort of do need a mindset that is willing to, make the most of those opportunities and those enabling factors. So otherwise, we just sort of sit back without any agency, and we do have agency. So I think that knowing that we can do something about it is probably the best mindset to start with.
Yeah. And so how can individuals bounce back from financial setbacks or failures to strengthen their resilience and their financial well-being?
It starts with having a safety net or a buffer zone. So saving is, and that's why I think this program that I started working on years ago, which still exists today, actually, and it's become very successful. But saving was at the core of that, and that's what really changed people's life. And I saw it because they had never had a safety net before. They never had that resilience to fall back on when things went wrong. Many were on low incomes, so they had just enough to scrape by. But when anything went wrong, that really could have a much bigger impact than what it may have if you'd had some in reserve. So the only way to have that resilience is through saving. So you need that buffer zone, and it's really important, because if you don't have anything, one small setback can then put you into, you need to use credit. If you don't have access to mainstream credit, you might be tempted to go to a payday lender, or you might be overusing buy now, pay later platforms. And then it's a spiral, and then it can get down to a point where it's really difficult to climb back up. So having that, these shocks happen to all of us. No one is exempt from having a financial shock, but it's what you've got in reserves that makes the difference between surviving it or, getting through it and then or else not, and then spiraling into a debt spiral, which can lead to long-term financial hardship.
Yeah, and that sounds really difficult. And the more we've been talking, the more I'm realizing that with topics like finance and financial well-being, education seems so key here. So how can we go about increasing our financial well-being knowledge and our education around this? Because there's so much terminology that's being thrown around. Even as we've been talking, I'm noticing terminology that people might have not heard of. So how do we begin that process?
That's really difficult, and I think that is one of our biggest struggles in the sector, like from a research point of view, but from government's point of view, the finance, even the banks. Everyone is trying to find ways to best facilitate learning for consumers. So. And it is difficult, and it's been when we first started in this area 20 years ago. This is how we were a bit naive back then, but financial literacy, they said, we just got to increase people's financial literacy. They just got to know more. So let's print more brochures or let's give out more information, and then people will make the right decisions. So but we know that now knowledge doesn't equal change behaviour or different behaviour, but it is the starting point. So you've got to, and you can never know everything either, but what we have now focus on is trying to make people aware of where they can go to get good, fair, unbiased advice and help, and to help people know where the resources are, so that they can make informed decisions. Because, there are many financial education programs around. There's many online. The government has a website called Money Smart, which is great. But, first of all, A, you've got to know that they exist, and B, it can't cover everything. So where do people go, and what are the right questions they need to ask? So, it's like I always think, well, I don't have to be a mechanic in order when my car breaks down. So, but I need to know where to go. I need to know, the right questions to ask, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the more important question, is to know where to go to get help. And what we find is that most people, and there's many, many surveys that show the same thing, is that people, because in the absence of knowing where to go, they rely on family and friends for their financial advice. And while that might be great in some cases, in some cases it's not so great when, Uncle Bill tells you to invest in X, Y, and Z. And so I think that knowing where to go and knowing the difference between dodgy sources and good sources to get your information from is really key. So But you know what, all of the literature tells us is that the best place starts in the home. And again, that may have been a good idea at some point, but it's not always the best way now. Yeah. So it is in schools now. So there are, it's not called financial literacy, it's embedded in other subjects. So even if it is actually within the curriculum nationally across the state. So kids are getting some financial education now, but it will be, they won't go home and say, "Oh, guess what? I've done financial literacy today." So, yeah. But it's more embedded in other subjects, which, you know, there's really good reasons for that.
Yeah, and you make a really good point about informed decision making. And it's true, sometimes a family member or a friend is like, "Oh, this is doing really well in the market. You should invest in it." And you're like, "Oh, okay, sure, why not?" And like, some people don't have the knowledge they need to make decisions for themselves, or they don't know how things work. Like, for example, you go to a bank and you ask them for advice. Are they going to give you the best advice for you, or are they going to give you the best advice for the bank and, you know, the business that they are running? So I feel like, especially in finance, like I mentioned, there's so many like different terminologies being used, and I feel like it deters people from wanting to find out more about finance and be more informed, because it's so confusing. And sometimes you're just like, I'd rather stay out of it because it is so confusing, and, you know, when something happens, then I'll deal with it then. So how can we sort of bridge that sort of barrier and move past this sort of block that sort of exists there, where we're like, "Oh, it's too confusing, I don't want to get into it"?
That's really it's such a fair and such a true comment, and we see this all the time. I've have felt like that, and it's, even though I research in this area, and in my school there are, you know, financiers that are much more high level in terms of normal finance, but it can be confusing. And the best way is to start with your day-to-day easy, not easy things, but putting some money away. So saving, which we did as kids in our piggy banks, you know. Yeah. So the same concept starts. Paying your debts off. Don't get into debts, and having some money set aside to have some fun. So I think they're starting with that simple, basic day-to-day area of your financial well-being, concept is the best place to start, and then taking opportunity to find out little bits and here and there without it becoming too overwhelming, and go to really good sources. And I know you mentioned the Barefoot Investor earlier, and I have found that his work, Scott Pape's work, really, really good because it's accessible and it's readable, and it's it's a book that I gave my daughter to help step through the many areas, and it's broken down into chunks, which is otherwise it just seems so overwhelming. And it can be like a needs by basis. I mean, at the age of 15, do you need to know about how a mortgage works? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're really keen, probably, but you don't normally seek that out until the time comes. And then, but then do your homework. And we are lucky we have Dr. Google, and we can look up resources like Money Smart that the government has. And you know that the government, while we may not trust them with everything, the advice and the resources they have on their website are the best ones you can go to. And also just ask the questions, and then you can sort of work out where your source is, like you said, with the banks. So you know what that type of bias is. But at the end of the day, if you are going to mortgage, you're going to have to talk to a bank about it and ask the benefits and the catches with each thing. And so I think it is about asking a lot of questions and then taking it away and talking about it with people you trust. I think that's a good thing to do, and to talk about it with each other. And this has been one of the issues, is talking about it, is like that the gender inequity that we have found is where, and all the research will show that men are supposed to have higher levels of financial literacy than women, and it's and I have issues with how it's measured, mind you, but it's because they're more likely to talk at the barbecue about their investments or their this or their that, whereas women won't be talking about that. So women are less likely to talk about money and money issues amongst themselves. And so I think those things can change. I think they may be changing. I mean, me and my friends, we'll talk about our superannuation funds that we're in, and uni super versus what their industry ones are. So I think that, and that might be an age thing as well as we're getting closer to that time. But I think that talking about things and normalizing these topics is where we need to work on. And I think that's a really good start, because once they're normalized, it becomes easier to field a lot of information that might be out there and question it and work out for what's best for you. And I mean, it doesn't matter. Some things are not always bad for everybody, but like you said, like young people started getting onto the crypto thing and the crypto, and it's just like, that's really scary.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And now we see, and we're doing a lot of work in the area of buy now, pay later, and influencing Treasury with the legislations just come out to make that it is now going to be seen as credit and it'll be regulated. And but that's a dangerous product for young people and all people if they are financially. If they don't have any financial resilience, they will be relying on that and having too many accounts, not just one, and then you need to pay them back, over 4 weeks, and that leaves little amount of money, and then they're borrowing more, and so it can become it's very easy for that to turn into a big trap. But again, how that's talked about with each other. I've heard young people talk about it on the tram, and they're using it as a verb, like just afterpay it.
Oh yeah.
And it's almost like it's so easy, and it's become so easy to do that when the need is so pressing. And this is where when the system of our finance and our life, because you've got these consumer marketing there, and the products and the companies that are trying to make you buy things, and how technology is enabling that. Because I mean, I can buy a pair of shoes while I sit in bed, just scrolling on the top like those, and you can press a button and it's all done.
Yeah.
So it's very easy. There's no friction there to try and slow those sorts of transactions down, which becomes very easy and dangerous.
Yeah, certainly. And there seems to be an increased need for awareness around all of this. So what are some key indicators or signs that suggest an individual is lacking, financial resilience or awareness?
Having a lot of debt is the biggest sign, biggest red flag. How many buy now, pay later accounts have you got? Do you have a payday loan? What's your credit card looking like? Is it paid off or is it creeping up? So it's 100% it's debt, and that's what puts people into a precarious position.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is perfect to lead into our practices and habits section. So here I really want to focus on debt and talking about maybe a specific strategy or a financial tool that you might recommend to manage this or deal with this so we can build our resilience and well-being.
The first thing is to pay down your debts. That's the first step, and this sounds counterintuitive, but it's often best to start with the smallest debt first, rather than the biggest one, because if you've got quite a few, say different, like a credit card, outstanding amount, and you've got a couple of buy now, pay laters. Whatever's the easiest one or the quickest one, it's a psychological thing, because if you can pay down the smallest wins, you can tick them off.
Yeah.
It sort of gets you motivated. But if you're trying to tackle a $20,000 personal loan, rather than $1,000, credit card, just start with the easy wins first and build that up. And that's really the thing you've got to do, is pay down your debt and then start putting that some money into a savings, And there's golden rules around what that might look like, and it would look like things for different people. But generally, if you've got $2,000 or $3,000, especially for a young person, set aside, that is there, but you don't touch it. It just gives that little bit of a buffer zone for if something goes wrong, but keep building on that. And there's proportions of your income that you can look at to say, that gives you an idea of where any imbalance. So, 60% goes to your everyday costs and paying your bills and the rent. Although, having said that, the housing crisis is blowing all this out of the water.
Yeah.
And when people are paying, 50%, 60% of their income on rent, I mean, it's impossible to make ends meet. But as a rule, there's 60% for your everyday, 20% for your sort of unexpected, your resilience things or resilience costs there that you can start building up that fund for. And then you can have 10% that will be on your, that you can have fun with, that you need to have a life. And I think this is what, where people come undone, is where everything is going on bills and debts, and they're not having a life. And then it's just like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And it becomes very demotivating. But if you have this set aside and then you do have some for fun, it's fine to have fun. I used to get a little bit annoyed when we have these financial education programs, which I've evaluated many of them, and for people especially on low income, they would start saying, well, how much does your coffee a day cost? Oh, you could save that by just having an instant coffee at home, and I just thought, if people really enjoy coffee for $5, like, don't take every bit of joy away from people. You've still got to have some joy in your life, and if you take it away, you become deprived, and deprivation is one of the things that goes against trying to build any resilience or any good habits. So, but the main tool is to budget. No, first of all, be aware of what your income is and being aware of what your outgoings are, and then you can see exactly where some things are. Like if you're sort of subscribed to 5 streaming platforms, they sort of tend to creep up because you see a program that you might want to really watch and it's only available on Apple TV, so you sign up for that one, and then next thing there's something on Prime, so you sign up to that one. So again, don't cut them all out, but maybe just cut them down a little bit. Maybe have one or two, and so there's things like that. So the awareness really is the first big thing you've got to do. What's coming in, what's going out, and then you can make informed decisions about balancing where that expenditure is. So I think, and then the other 10% normally can go to a long-term goal. So maybe that is about saving for an overseas trip or a wedding, or so one of those big long-term things that you might have on your horizon. So it is about proportioning that income into a ratio that will work for you, that allows you to have something in reserve, a buffer zone. That's so critical.
Yeah, and you mentioned the first thing was paying off your debts. Now, for people who are struggling just even to make money, how can they go about doing that?
Oh, look, it's difficult, and I know at this time it's really, really difficult. It's just as little as you can, if it's just a little bit, just to chip away at it. If it is a crisis point where there isn't any way of doing this, then you need to seek some help from a financial counsellor. And there's a national debt hotline, and they will walk you through it, and they will sometimes they're able to advocate for you for outstanding bills that have sort of started to stay there that you can't get rid of, and they can advocate with the organisation, or like it's a utility, it's your electricity or your landlord or the bank, and they can help set in place a sort of a payment plan that is more affordable, or even in some cases they can get a waiver for some debts where it's just going to be impossible for a person who maybe has gone bankrupt and they just can't pay these bills anymore. So financial counsellors are really critical to our community and as part of that system that I was talking about. And for people in crisis who are really don't leave it too long. As soon as you find that it's overwhelming and you're feeling that stress and anxiety, also you can approach the banks and utility companies yourself. They all have really good, they have to have, they've hardship areas where you just ring them and you talk to them and they will help you out. So the worst thing you can do is say nothing, and the worst thing you can do is do nothing. Yeah. So I think just having that agency and knowing that these people they have to help you. There's guidelines, there's government regulations about this.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that and making it feel like this is an approachable thing in our lives and something that we can work with other people to help resolve, and we don't have to feel like we're alone or on our own trying to solve financial issues or pay back debts, for example. So I'd love to transition into our open mic section here and just give you a chance to talk about anything that you would like to, and the space is just yours.
Look, I think, and what you just said there too is really important, because I always think about this analogy of health, financial health. And we have, do we feel ashamed to go to the doctor if something is wrong? Yeah. No, we shouldn't. So why should we feel, finance is complex. Finance is hard. It's just like our health. It's all, it relies on so many things, and things can just go wrong through nothing that we've done ourselves. And so asking for help is the first thing that you should never feel afraid of doing or any shame about doing. I really want to advocate for women's financial well-being, and a lot of my work and research and advising to community organisations have all centred around women and also the causes of financial stress in their lives and hardship has been like financial abuse, which is part of family violence. And I had a PhD student who did her whole thesis on financial abuse in young people's relationships. And I think it's that raising that awareness where if we feel like something's not right, if we feel like we're being exploited, if we feel like we're being taken advantage of, and we don't have any control or, say in how the income is being used, or if we don't know how it's being used, that's financial abuse. And there are, again, financial counsellors are all skilled up now to deal with financial abuse, and there are, and it is part of family violence. So for young people, especially young women these days, I think that it's a really important awareness to know that this exists and to look at money within a relationship. It's fine for us, so, as individuals, we can, we might be good or not at managing our own money. But once someone else comes along, all of a sudden handling money becomes a joint thing, even if, we do have our own accounts. But once people are cohabitating, there are joint bills, there are joint expenses that need to be dealt with jointly. And we've just seen too many cases, and we've seen too much example. And it's been one of the areas of research that has really grown in the last few years, and their recognition, and also how widespread it is. And it's quite insidious, because again, women feel shame and embarrassment about talking about this if they're and they're also not recognizing it as family violence, or that it's not right. So I think that whenever I've given presentations on this, there's always someone in the audience who've said, "Oh, my sister's going through that," or "This is happening to me," and that it's so common. And the research tells us about what we know of reported cases. 16% of women experience some form of financial abuse. So it's an awareness thing, and it's something that, I would make sure my daughter knows about it, and it's something that we need to have conversations about, and also know how to help. If your friends talk about it, and you sort of know how to help them as well. So I think the issue for women and financial well-being is my passion project, I suppose, because it's of the inequality that we face. And again, it's affected by not just by the individual, it's by the system. So, inequitable pay, for instance, a pay gap, the caring responsibilities that women face, and how that's unbalanced. So there is so much in the system that makes it harder for women to achieve financial well-being. Men go through from day dot to end without ever having a career break. Women don't. If they have as soon as they have a child, or as soon as they're caring for someone else and they take a break, that's where the downhill future financial security starts to deteriorate, because they're of superannuation. So as soon as there's a break in that superannuation flow, the disadvantage starts.
Yeah, and I did want to bring up this idea of the sort of stigma surrounding talking about like financial situations, because there's often this thing of like, don't talk about money or finance with people because it's private. We should learn how to deal with it on our own. And if we are going through financial difficulty, that's something to be ashamed of. And you shouldn't bring that up to someone because they'll think, you're not making a lot of money, you're not doing that well. So it's something that we like to keep private. So how can we deconstruct that stigma surrounding it, build awareness, and build, a space where we can have these conversations and help one another and feel like we're not in isolation?
That's exactly right, and I was told that myself as growing up, and it was, you don't talk about money, sex, and religion or something, and I think these it's a multi-pronged approach that needs this. It's like our media, for instance, and I think that there's some of the more soap operas, what do they call them? Those, there's been some of those shows now that have highlighted financial abuse or family violence, or so bringing these, so the media can play a role, the entertainment industry can play a role. I mean, even I think on Netflix there was a show called The Maid. I don't know if you heard of that one. So financial abuse, and so that was again, that brings it to people's. Once it comes into that, in the entertainment area, that really has a powerful effect. And I think that, the Me Too movement, and we see how that really set the foundation, or really gave it, momentum for women and equality, which was, came from the entertainment industry. So, but it's multi-pronged. It has to be in the workplace. It has to be from our society, and we can all play our role. So yes, I mean, I talk about it when people ask about my research. So and it, because it is money, it's something that we can all relate to. So so I think that some topics, no one really needs to know about. If I was like a scientist and I was like making some sort of new material or something, and if I talk for half an hour about the cells and the, I don't know, some people might find it interesting, but as soon as I talk about money and women, and it becomes interesting to them, because they can all relate it to something that they've experienced as growing up, or someone they know, and I think that one thing I would do in a presentation normally is, as soon as I ask a question, think for 1 minute about how money was in your household. What do you remember? And people are going to remember things, and people will have experiences about it growing up as a child. And sometimes, many times they're very good memories, and other times they're not so good. But everyone will have a memory about money in their home.
Yeah, certainly. And that I think is the perfect way to round off today, and creating this sort of space where money feels relatable, where the topic itself feels relatable, and it's not just something people who are doing really well financially can talk about, but everyone can talk about it. And I think that's just really great, and a really great message to send out there as well. So thank you so much, Ros, for coming on the show today and having this chat with me.
Thank you, Joanna. It's been an absolute delight, and a great opportunity to talk about this.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure as well. And for those of us who want to find out a bit more about you, where can we go?
There's I have an email address and a webpage at RMIT University. I have LinkedIn account under Roslyn Russell. It's easy to find. I don't do a lot on Facebook or I have a Twitter account, but I'm usually just a stalker. And so, yeah, I'm not big on the socials, unfortunately, but I also provided you a website where all my work is. Like we, as academics, we have a ORCID account where we list all our publications and our work, and then that's used for getting grants and things like that. So that's always, but email's great if that's available to people. If you put that on you in the show notes, that'd be great.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we've also dropped the links and all the information in the description below for everyone.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say to everyone listening, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Joanna.
You have been listening to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website, pr.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Joanna. Thanks for tuning in.